I could say something. I will respectfully disagree with what you are saying. As if you are making the state and a fair institution that respected individuals who come from such background and who made those films. Republic of State, including its most important institution that's supposed to protect and preserve all these cultures, actually destroyed these movies. And we know this. Now we are coming from Turkey, right? And we're not trying to say something that's specifically to portray Turkey as a bad country, but we have to be honest enough to criticize there are failures in this country. And if we want this country to go further, and we have to come to these realities, we should not make any attempt to make Turkey look good when it is truly failed. So Yilmaz Guney was jailed, tortured, and for specific reasons. And you can't even say that the reason that he'd been jailed, he'd been into the jail, is not necessarily related to his movie making. He was an icon, of course, but icon for a reason. He was a rebel, of course, but he was a rebel against the existence of state that oppressed his identity. So we cannot deny these facts. And I do appreciate, once again, you're just trying to do your best to make Turkey look good, but it's not.
That's not my view. First of all, of course, his films, once he made it to France and won an award and everything, it was not possible to show his films. But actually, the state didn't ask people to turn over their copies and destroyed them. The distributors destroyed the films, and people tried to confiscate some of the films outside the country, tried to show them in ramshackle theaters in Germany, France, and etc. The actual people who had an interest in these films, they destroyed it, not necessarily the state. But again, this is the first time the Culture Ministry have a series devoted to a director, and they took the time and the money to have these new prints available. So that's this question.
This is a bit of a digression, but last year here I saw a film by a German director about a Turkish woman and her young boy. And obviously there is a strong connection between this German cultural institution and Turkish films. And the first time I noticed any kind of connection was Ali, Fear Eats the Soul by Fassbinder, yes. And which I'm sure you're familiar with. But so I can only assume it's because of the large population of Turkish guest workers in Germany that there would be this connection between a German institution and Turkish films. Is that correct?
Yes, to a certain extent it is correct, but we did other type of film programs with the cooperation of Goethe Institute, like the Young Turks of German Cinema and things like this. So they're hosting us, and they're very happy also to be able to participate in a program organized by the Culture Ministry. So we hope that there will be future programs under the same understanding.
Can I just, this is the only second time I've been here, so I'm new, so I'm not familiar with this particular institution. But do they also show films from other countries as well as Turkey, or does Turkey occupy a special position and vis-a-vis?
Sylvia can answer this question, but if you follow the programs, there are a lot of environmental issues, the human rights issues, and Goethe Institute has provided quite a wide array of films from all over the world, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we do not necessarily focus on Turkish films. We also show films from other countries, and if there's a connection to Germany within Europe, and working with groups living in Germany, then of course we.
So is the connection, especially the very significant role of Turkish guest workers in Germany?
Yeah, for the sense, you can say so.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, pardon me. I believe it was you who mentioned that in the Fatih Ackman film, which is also German oriented, that the old gentleman was played by the same person that played Hassan. Did I understand?
That's correct.
That's right. Yeah.
So because that was an excellent film. So it was the same person, because this film today is like from 1970, or
right.
So it's like 30 years different.
Well, this particular actor also became an sort of exile actor. So he lived for a while in Sweden and did stage work, and he was an international actor, and he played in Israeli films and German films. And
well, that's interesting to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this series has been shown. I've been trying to see as many as I could, and I think some of us tried to see the friend list Friday, and I'm hoping that's going to be rescheduled.
We're hoping to reschedule it actually here, so I think Sylvie and I may be talking about that tonight.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
Sorry about that.
The German technology will be able to.
Yeah, as far surpasses American projectors.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you raised the issue of landscape and you saw the parallels with Kurosawa, and I think that you kind of touched on it, but I think it could be developed a little bit, that there's an ideological component to that. Kurosawa was a Marxist early in his career, and it's pretty traditional with Marxist artists that you would be trying to contrast the normal way of portraying human beings, the individual, the bourgeois individual in charge of his or her fate, versus the collectivity that's necessary to affect social change for people who are really squashed, which is the vast majority of people on the face of the earth. So I think that's important. And
very good point,
the other thing, in regard to what you said about state institutions, I think you were almost treating the issue of state institutions as being neutral, and just since we are seeing a revolutionary filmmaker, there's no such thing as a neutral institution to a revolutionary filmmaker. They're always going to be dominated by one class or the other, and when the bourgeois institutions fail, the central government fails, you find this polarization to the right and to the left. And what you described about the left making all of these gains that were really out of control of the normal legislative networks, it was very much like what happened in Chile, where you had a legally elected government, but it had to be overthrown with the help of the CIA, because people who were being given reforms they'd never been given before grabbed hold so hard and pushed much further than even Allende's government wanted them to. It was very much a parallel situation, and I'm sure that the Turkish left is going to revive.
I'm not so optimistic.
Well, actually, let's take one last question, and then we can move out and have our reception, and then we can keep on asking questions, please.
I would like to ask a question to the first speaker. So you mentioned that what happened before 1980s can be attributed to the fact that there was like lack of power and control by the political parties to a certain extent. And now if you take a look at now, Turkey is controlled by a government who got about 50% of the votes in the last election. And still Turkey is notorious for arresting journalists, student leaders, and people can easily get into jail by listening a revolutionary band called Curator. So how would you describe that situation? And the thing that I want to emphasize is the perception of democracy, unfortunately, in Turkey, is not very true. And I believe nothing has changed after the military took the control after 1980s. So, would you like to?
I mean, it's an extremely difficult question to answer, and it's a point well taken. I mean, it's I would give you a nerdy answer, which is to say that the Turkish state and the state institutions which derive from the state they have a better capacity to absorb demands made upon it by individual citizens, as well as associational and organizational groups. And that's a very nerdy answer from an institutionalist point of view, which is not what you want to hear. By what I mean, between 1961 to 1980, the state had no capacity to absorb demands made upon it, whether you were an extreme Maoist or whether you were a libertarian, they existed, or whether you were an average Kemalist citizen that grew up in Istanbul. But the state had no capacity to manage diversity between 61 to 80 because such diversity had never been projected with such intensity upon the state institutions which administer the realm, so to speak, and the government which actually manages or oversees the direct rule of and the aggregation of particularistic interests at that time. Since then, you know, so much change has happened. I would disagree with you to the extent that nothing has changed. I mean, I think a lot has changed. I think there's been generational changes. I think there've been you know, Turkey's entire experience with the Europeanization process, the demands placed upon the Turkish state by European institutions, and the wave of Europeanization that has taken place. Now that hasn't taken hold, that hasn't been widespread and internalized by all individuals, as well as state actors, as well as governing actors. But it's not the same Turkey. And that is not, for me, romanticizing anything. It's a vastly different landscape. The best I can, when people ask me how I classify Turkey today, Turkey by my definition is no means a liberal democracy. But Turkey is a free country to the extent that the most dissident Kurds or dissident people who have quarrels with the Turkish state today are able to project their disgruntlement at a variety of levels. And yes, that sometimes results in quite unfair and very unfair treatment of journalists, students, at the hands of the police, in the hands of the judiciary. But nevertheless, those debates are in public. If you talk about the Kurdish identity issue, I don't call it the Kurdish problem because I don't believe Kurds in themselves are a problem. But Kurds have problems in Turkey. But never before have they been able to project those problems that they have, in terms of representation, in terms of cultural rights, minority rights, whatever you want to call it. Those are openly expressed at a daily practice and daily ritual, whether it's through the press, whether it's through associations, whether it's through use of language, whether it's use of symbols. The Turkish state has had to come to terms with that. The Turkish state recognizes the Kurdish regional government. The military actively has, ties with the Kurdish regional government. That has never happened before. And that's not romanticizing it, that is just change. And I think we're a long way from settlement, and especially for our Kurdish citizens, I think, to come to an amicable conclusion, if there is such a thing. But I would disagree with saying that there's been no change. But
can I also add? I don't know how many Americans know that Kurdistan is actually in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. So if you're going to divide up, you have to talk about how the Kurds are treated in each one of those countries.
That's a good point.
That's a good
Well, it's a
point.
struggle for self-determination, but I think most repressions come from Turkey.
You know that?
I believe that's true.
It used to be
I would
Iraq.
say,
I think on that note, we can move to our reception and keep asking those questions. We're not part of the state apparatus, not employed or paid by the state. We just put this program together. Thank you, my panelists, and thank you for being here.